Good morning. Middle of the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, page 377, the bottom of 77, 377. And this is the basis for Ayin Beis, namely, specifically pages 1467 through 1471. And the context is to understand Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, the Yichud, how all of existence is really and truly just a manifestation of godliness. Yesh Ma'ayin, as he explained it, and Yesh Ma'ayin, the emphasis is two things: that there's nothing in common between them, so the Yesh is completely bottled to the Ayin, and it doesn't impact the Ayin, meaning the Ayin Eliki, the divine creative force, not just the core source of the creator, but also the light and energy, creative energy, is also not impacted. And the example he gave was of a nefesh, of the soul is not impacted by the fact that it gives life to the body. However, when you start breaking it down further, the example, you realize that there is a dimension of the soul that does get impacted by its interaction with the body. The soul feels pain and joy. And so he explained that both mukhrich, you have to say both are true, depends which level of the soul. There's the level of the soul that interacts with the body and with the physical, and there it does have some impact. And then there's the soul as it's removed, like we call the etzem koyach hanefesh, or the ruchnius shabegashmius. That's where it's impacted. And there's the gashmius shaberuchnius, which is a higher level, that the soul is somewhat removed, even though it's starting to relate to the body, but it's still not the gashmis, the ruchnius shabegashmius, like the blood itself. Whereas Lamaila, he made it clear, does not, even though there are also two levels, and there is some effect on the lower level, but he's emphasizing time and again that in truth, when you go deeper, there is no effect. So as I've been explaining, you could explain it in two ways. One is that it's similar to soul and body, that there's two levels. And the higher level, the divine is not affected by its interaction with existence, creation. But it's very clear from Ayin Beis especially, and also from the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, that there's a distinction between a soul and a body is closer. In the soul and body are closer to each other, more commensurate to each other than the divine energy in existence. He made that very, very clear as well in what we learned yesterday, and where he said that the nefesh has he says these words, so he said that even though by the nefesh, let me just get the exact words, where he said, nefesh adam. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Has something erech v'ishtabus to the body, to the structure of the body and the soul. So here he makes a distinction. So you have to say that there is something in common a bit with this example of the soul, but it's not quite as much of a relationship. In Ayin Beis, he made it very clear that there's a distinction. If you look at the bottom of page 1470, he says clearly like this. He says that the way Malchus comes into Nevroim, even though it does manifest in the physical reality of existence, it makes it clear it's not like this in the neshama that manifests in the body, that's affected by the bodily experiences. Because the neshama is also a nivra b'al gvul. V'agam the ma'ayin liyesh, the neshama ain't coming ma'ayin liyesh the nivroim, even though neshama can be compared to other creations. But a soul is an identity. V'yesh al kaponim eze erech V'ishtavis la'kovis haguf v'nefesh. Mashenkin ha'oros ha'malchus. The divine energy, gam k'may shabayah de'aparsa, had b'chinas ha'lakus shemuvdul be'erech mebriya ba'al gvul. He goes on to explain that even though it separates from the divine, like words, like he said, the yetzim l'chutz, still it's a koyach halaki, and as such, ein bezeh shinui klal hisavis ein b'chinas hispailis da koyach hapoel. Yeah. So at the end of the day, there is something. When the divine energy manifests in existence, there is some relationship, but it's not quite in a way that affects it, and therefore it's different than in a neshama and a guf. Even though I did begin by first explaining it with that moshel. Yeah. He goes on to explain it in Ayin Beis on page 1470 and 1471. Okay. And that sums up what we learned. And we're now at the bottom. We finished, I should say, page 377, the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer. And the last thing you said, there's no shinui klal. You say, Ato hu, the Ato zekoi, Bereishis, the Yud Maamorei, the 22 letters, and Amshachis, Yichud Tata. So Yichud Tata means it manifests in existence, but still remains somewhat removed. So it's a Yichud. It is the divine, even in the divine within existence, is still connected to the divine primarily, though it relates to existence. That's what he says at the bottom of 377. I'm ready to continue. Next page, 378. Unless somebody has any questions, let's continue learning. Okay. So now, they see a very unique style of the Mittler Rebbe as he further develops and analyzes this relationship. Because on one hand, we're not saying that God creates from a completely distant place. It is koyach hapoel benifel. The producer is investing himself in the production, in the product. At the same time, we're saying he's not impacted by it. But it's still different than that level of energy that altogether does not manifest within existence. So Mittler Rebbe is going to now analyze this further, and it's interesting that Rebbe Rashab does not make reference to the next 2 pages of the Mittler Rebbe's analysis. So Mittler Rebbe is going to go further now into understanding how the divine energy relates to existence. So we know it's not quite like a soul relates to a body, but on the other hand, it's not quite like the divine that is completely transcendent and removed from existence. So he's going to introduce us to 3 levels, actually. He's going to say there are 3 levels. But before we read, let me just preface something. We always know that God can do whatever he wants. He could just say poof, and you have existence. But as we've also learned, Hashem didn't want to do it that way. Firstly, he wanted us to understand his process. He gave us intelligence. He wants us to connect with him, relate to him. So he's explaining to us his process. And essentially, he created us in a way that helps us understand God's promise. So just like we have thought, speech, and action, so God doesn't need thought, speech, and action. He can just create like that. But still, he did it in a way of thought, speech, and action. Like Bria, Yitzir, Asiya. Chabad, Chagas, Seichel, Midas, behavioral actions. The second reason is because that we should have stepping stones through which we can reconnect and retrace the steps and unite with godliness. So whenever we talk about the process of creation, you see, for example, it doesn't say Bereishis bara Elokim es shamayim v'ha'aretz. It could have stopped right there. God created heaven and earth, and he could have just jumped straight to the 6th day of creation, and then he created a human being. No, you see, it's a detailed description what was created in day 1. Hashem said, Yehi oir, asara Maamorei livrei elam. He made statements. Yehi rakia, hachos oris desha, Yehi ma'oris. Every day consisted of a particular creation, particular focus of that day. And it was in 6 days. And then it says, Vayechul Hashemayim, and the end, after it all, he rested and came Shabbos. So you see from that creation, Hashem bound himself, so to speak, in some type of logical structure, which he didn't have to do, but he wanted to do. So that will help us understand the yichud that we're trying to establish is this, the following. Each of us, you and I, have our own agenda in life. My needs, my survival. I have to eat, sleep, drink, make a living, take care of family. We all have our life responsibility. But we were sent to this world, not just to survive and to exist, but to thrive, to use our God-given gifts to transform the world and make it a home for God. That requires a realignment of our focus. So it's not just about like we are just nefesh habamis, focusing on the behemoth, on its eating and sleeping and drinking and taking care of its own needs, but there's a nefesh halikis striving, yearning and longing to connect to the transcendent and to the God's purpose and our calling in life. So there's a battle going on as we've been learning. But the battle is a step-by-step, because again, we are created in a structured way. You don't begin your life at 5 years old and be a tremendous scholar. At 5, you learn Chumash. At 10, you learn Mishnah. At 15, you learn Gemara. And so on, we continue to grow as we see the maturity process. Hopefully, we don't just grow chronologically, we also grow intelligently. And emotionally, like we learned earlier in Ayin Bey's volume 3, mutfa, our behavioral, reflexive emotions, murgish, our developed emotions, and muskal, our intellectually based cognitive emotions. These are all levels of growth and maturity where a person begins as a little child, all it knows is to take care of its own needs. You can't expect a child to discipline itself and be focused completely on God. That's not a problem. That stage in a child's life, its focus on God is its growth. The child needs to eat, needs to be protected, needs to sleep, needs to be healthy, needs to be nurtured. But as we grow, more is expected of us. The Tselem Elokim, the divine image in which we were created, is expected to start emerging. And that requires work. So in that sense, when we talk about Yichud, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, you're talking about a Yichud, as we're going to learn, there's levels of Yichud. First, we're going to learn a Yichud that's on our terms, that we relate to. God is relating to us. I always bring the example when we bench after a meal, or the blessings we say before a meal. That's the divine as it's tailored, as it's customized to your needs. You ate a piece of bread, drank some water, other things that we do. That's the ultimate mamala kalam. And yes, there too, we need to thank God. We need to show gratitude. We need to appreciate it, not just indulge and just feel I own the world and I own a sense of entitlement. Beautiful. But it's still godliness on your terms. Then, as we've learned, then you start realizing, 1 second, God is not just here to serve me. God is not just here to sustain me. There's also elements of God that are deeper levels. So as we grow in this process, we're growing to understand the divine energy within existence, not just that which is tailored, which is shaped, like we've been learning, koyach hapoel benifel. That's the divine within the structure, like the artist within the art. But we want to get to know the artists somewhat deeper than just the art. What lies behind the scenes? What other art can he create? Is he just an artist? And all the other things that we want to learn about. And that's where we grow to higher levels of the understanding the divine, as it's not directly koyach hapoel benifel, similar to what we just talked about, the neshama and the guf. There's the neshama as it relates to the body. It feels the pains and joys of the body, and vice versa. The body feels its pains and joys of the soul. But then there's a level of the soul that's higher, that precedes coming into this world. And that's not impacted quite by the bodily experiences. With the qualification that Elikus is different than Neshama B'guf, like I said, because Neshama B'guf is Sfarta Yesh, he said. But still, there is some common denominator there. So with that said, let's now learn what he's going to be doing now is understanding these different relationships. So when you're talking after Psukkah de Zimra, where you've gotten the animal soul's attention, and you have focused it in focusing it on hallelujah, like he said, the praise, the illumination of the divine into the animal soul. And then Birchas Yetzer, where we talk about the malachim, the markava, the root of the animal soul. And then Avas Elam, when we get to Shema, you're getting into a contemplation that first begins on our terms, the Yichud Tata, Yichud Tata. And then from there we grow as we keep on understanding deeper levels of godliness. Now, if you really go to the Kol HaMayrich Be'echad in Ayin Beis, he actually spelled it out, all these levels. When he said Mayrich Be'echad, he said, what's Mayrich? Elaborating. Echad is not just that existence was created by God by Dibur. If you go back, you'll see the language of Dibur, and then Maisa, Dibur, and Machshava are three levels of understanding God's relationship with us. He discussed it in the whole piece of Hamayr Be'echad, which is, to give you the page, well, it ends approximately at 1423, but 1421, let me see where it began, the conversation. Yeah, approximately, 1417 to be exact, is where the Rebbe Rashab went through this. So what we're going to learn now actually would be very helpful to look back at 1417. You'll see the parallels as well. Because remember, even though there are direct references from the Rebbe Rashab to the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, but then there's indirect ones, things that the Mittler Rebbe spoke about or speaks about, and the Rebbe Rashab spoke about earlier. Because the Rebbe Rashab organized it in his own way in order to create a far more comprehensive Ayin Beis picture. But there are a lot of ideas that overlap, so I'm just pointing that out. So let's go now, top of page 378. It says like this. Okay, so we've established that there's divine energy within existence, and even that which relates to existence still is not affected. There's no shinui in the spilus. It remains removed. However, it relates more to existence because it is manifesting within. God is applying themselves. So now the Rebbe, as I said, goes back and forth, because he wants to get the perfect balance. Is it divine, or does it relate to existence? And we can understand why this is like a dance, a subtle, nuanced dance, because we're talking about trying to understand that we don't want to annihilate existence. We don't want to eliminate it. On the other hand, we want existence to relate to the source of life that gives it sustenance. So it's a constant dance here of trying to find the perfect balance. That's the back and forth and back and forth. It's the way I would explain why the Mittler Rebbe, it may sound somewhat like he's being intentionally vague. It's not the case, because he wants to capture both ends of it, that the divine manifests in existence, but it's still not existence. It's still divine. And it's really, if you think about it, that itself is part of the contemplation. How divine is it, and how much does it relate to the existence? You may recall we talked about in mitzvahs to give it a more palpable manifestation. When we say Asher Kedeshanu b'mitzvos b'tzavonu la'aniach tefillin, or lehadlik ner Shabbos Kedesh, or al atifas talis, or leisha basuka, or whatever, or lehadlik ner Chanukah. So when you say Asher Kedeshanu b'mitzvos b'tzavonu, you're clearly focusing on the one who sanctified us with his mitzvahs and commanded us. We're not focusing on the detail. It's only at the end of the blessing you say, and in what form did it take? Tzitzis, talis, tefillin, lighting a candle, all the other brichas mitzvahs that we make. So when you make the bracha, which one are you emphasizing? The answer is you can emphasize both. You can emphasize one or the other, and maybe it changes from day to day, from blessing to blessing. Sometimes we focus more on this is God's commandment to me. I'm bringing godliness into my life. And sometimes you focus, what form and fashion does that godliness manifest in my life? It manifests in tefillin. Tefillin is not tzitzis. Tzitzis is not a matzah. Matzah is not a lulav. So it's basically like kavanah klolis and kavanah pratis, sometimes the expression. The general kavanah is asher kedeshanu b'mitzvos b'tzavonu. That's emphasizing the divine element. And there, it's a divine experience. And the details is experiencing it as it relates to us. So you'll say, is Hashem relate to the tzitzis? Is he affected by it? The answer is, he's relating to it, but he's still not leisha nisi, he's still not affected by it quite, but he's definitely relating more to that detail. So just to give an example of where you have a constant dance, like I said, which one are you focusing on? Are you focusing on the detail, or you're focusing on the divine in that detail? You're focusing that God said that let there be light, or you're focusing on the very light that he created. And it's not a contradiction because both are true. He created light, and that light was created through a divine force called Yehi. The words Aleph Vav Resh, Sada Maamorei. So it's like, think of a computer or an appliance or a machine. The engineer first creates the forces that will shape something, and then when you're using the machine, you're focusing on what your needs are. But at the same time, there's a program behind the scenes that's letting it function. And both are correct. The zeros and ones of machine language, and the interface of computer language, and the interface of you pressing a button, and it triggers all these forces are all happening. They're all true. The question is, where's the focus? Is the focus on the forces behind the scenes, or is the focus on the outer manifestation of it? So with that, let's read now page 378. Ba'afal and the pages can be found at imbeis.com. Ba'afal pi shebechol Maamorei Bereishis nemar behem. That in the whole Maamorei Bereishis, when you read the story of creation in Bereishis, it says there, Kamoy inyan koyach ba'asiyah u'pu'ula gashmis. In other words, God didn't just create computer language. He didn't just create zeros and ones and ethereal forces at work. You see the language of koyach asiyah pu'ula gashmis. And he brings proof. We see the expression, for example, ki b'yom, kamoy b'yom aseis Hashem, shemayim v'saretz. Asiyah. Bereishis bara Elokim, you could say, okay, it's a general term he created. But how do you know he's using asiyah? So we see the focus on asiyah here. Sheba asiyah zu nikra ma'aseh yodov mamish. In this asiyah that he created, it's called ma'aseh yodov. This is God's handiwork. So just like we say, you have a thought, and you have a word that you speak, then there's things that you actually craft, you actually create, you actually build something. And we see we're using that expression of ma'aseh yodov mamish and b'shezeu b'keach hapoel b'niful mamish. That's just like a potter creating a pot, a silversmith creating a piece of silver. He's actually shaping something into creating a real actionable entity. My hand, my arm, Yazda, established the earth. So you see here, why is he using Yodi? He's not just saying God thought, and he created a thought, a divine, a creation on a thought level. Yadi Yazda Aretz, like using a muscle of a person who's using his hands to build something. So what do you see from this? That he is engaging with existence. He's not remaining completely removed. If you said God is thinking about existence and his thought creates, or his words create. So you could say, okay, so therefore, even though the creation happens, doesn't change him. But here you're clearly seeing that he's invested more than that. You see, we are associating Kavyachal, the words of actually building something, with mice. So again, you see the Rebbe Mittler Rebbe going back and forth, now back to the idea that it's not removed. Like in the past, end of the last paragraph on the previous page, he said, Nivdo min hapoil. He actually used the word dibur there. We'll get to dibur shortly. But nevertheless, there's no shinui. Yeah, okay, yeah. So he says, Ha'inyan hu, similar to what he said before about the neshama. The vade gamze emes. Remember he said, muchrachim, he said that we have to say both are true. That there's a part of the soul as it manifests and relates to the body, and there's a part of the soul that remains removed. He's not saying it's not exactly like the soul, because that distinction he made, but he's saying that vade gamze emes. This is also true. That what? That he manifests in asiyah. So he says, avol zeu madrega hagimel. So now he's introducing, this is this is not uncommon. The Mittler Rebbe may introduce something as if he already said it earlier. He didn't speak about a Madrega Gimel in this Maimer. He may have spoken about another Maimerim, but he speaks about it as a given because the Mittler Rebbe, as I said, had that free flow of Chassidus, that when it opened up, he would just flow. So he's saying that this is a third level, B'Yeridus Ha'era L'Ki B'Maisa Bereishis. This connection to Maisa, not just Dibur and Machshava, is a third level. We'll understand it as we go along. So I know he's introducing, what do you mean a third level? Where's the first and the second? So just be patient. You'll see in a moment. That this is a third level. So it's true, but it's a third level. It's not the first and second level. Shari Omer B'Maisa Bereishis Gimel L'Shenis. We find in the story of creation, we find three expressions. A Gimel L'Shenis Eila. We find these three expressions. The Bria, Yitzira, Asiya. Of Bria, Bora, Yitzira, shaping, and Asiya, a Maisa, like he said now, action. Kamoi Bereishis Bora. There the word Bora is used, to create. By Yivra Sama'eris, he created the luminaries. Ukahai Gavna, and similarly. Then we also find the Loshen Yitzira, by Yotzar. Loshen Yitzira, and then we have the Loshen of Asiya. Yitzira, we find, for example, by Yotzar Sa'adam. There we use Yitzira. And then Asiya, we just said, Aseis. B'yem Aseis Hashemayim V'sa'aretz. So you see three expressions used in the creation, which tells us they're not just synonymous, means there are three levels of God's engagement with creation, as he shall explain. So he says like this, V'chein loshen yitzira v'asik yidua. The gimel eila zeu b'gimel madregas the machshava dibur ma'isa b'chlal. And these three levels or terms are the three levels of thought, of speech, and of action in general. The bria hu be'esis ha'machshava. When you say bria, create, you're talking about the letters of thought. Kamei Bereishis bara, we say Bereishis bara, so it says Allah b'machshava dechochma livre. In the Targum he says b'chochmasa. Now Bereishis bara is referring Bereishis to chochma that arose in his mind. The thought in chochma to create. So Bereishis refers to God's thought. The dibur, the vayemer elikim. Then when it says vayemer elikim, speaking, God is speaking. Just a second. They used before, but yeah. That is the level of vayemer amira. Vayemer elikim zeh b'chinas yitzira. So speaking is the level of yitzira. Kamo his galus esis adibur min hamachshava. The behelim, that when your thoughts are concealed, when you express them in tangible words, you're actually revealing these letters of speech. They're coming from machshava, the behelim, shenikra siyur, the kitsuras hakeli, shemada umagala toyer yitzira. So just like we have tsuras hakeli, just like when in thought, the focus is a lot more on the energy, so to speak. Speech gives it body. Body, what kind of body? The body of Yetzirah, giving it shape and form. Shemana Megala Teir V'Tzura. It reveals a shape and a definition and a shape. Kach Yud Maimoris. So too is it with the 10 Maimoris, Maimer. Remember, I said Maimoris by Yemar, Dibur of Maisa Bereishis. That's not like thought. Thought remains connected with you and you alone. Speech is already something that another could hear. So relatively speaking, it's a koyach nivdal, it's your ability to communicate to another. From the core divine as it is in the letters of thought. So the world of Bria would be, Bada would be more as the divine sees existence in his own thoughts. And Yitzira Vayemer is when God is expressing it, that another can hear the words, and you find another identity is emerging now. Just like you see when a person who thinks, you don't know their thoughts until they speak. So it gives it Teir Tzura. Because these letters, the Maamorei of the 10 statements, they bring down that energy to become a moket tisavas nevraim, to become a source for the creation. Now you could say God doesn't need that, as I pointed out before, but he wants it to make sense to us. So imagine you have an architect who in his mind, he knows exactly what kind of building he wants to build. But if he doesn't communicate it in Dibur, you'll never know what he's thinking. So Dibur is the first step to communicate it to another, to create another. Since we want a world that has its independent identity, independent consciousness, so Dibur is the Maamorei, it brings it from that level, from Machshava into Dibur. And that makes it a Mokel Yitzavas and Evraim. Now, you could say this is a source for creation. Up till now, it's a source, but a removed source, because it's only within God's thought. It's not yet been expressed in real, tangible way that someone can say, that's what you mean. Yehi Oyer, Yehi Rakia. Yehi Oyer. Like the statement, let there be light. The Asius, Yehi Oyer. And the letters, Yehi Oyer, let there be light. Nasim Mokir Atzmius Librias Ha'oyer B'Peil Mamish. Once it's stated and God says it, it takes on now another level of shape and form that makes it the source, the core source for the actual creation of light. Now, again, could God have created it without saying it? Of course. But he wants, again, for us to relate to it. So he does it in a way that we see, that our machshava needs to come into dibur. You can't imagine, you can't expect your worker to read your mind. So you need the worker to express it. You need to express it to the worker. And same thing with the statement on the third day of creation, Tacha Aretz, that the earth shall sprout vegetation. So that too is a maimer. To create the growth of grass. Same thing with all vegetation. From what? From the koyach hatzameach shebaretz. So the koyach hatzameach we learned earlier is there. God implanted it in the earth. But now he wants it to be actualized. So to be actually, he says, Tacha Aretz. Now he's saying to the earth, you shall blossom, you shall sprout, you shall grow. And similarly, b'chol hatzirufim protim, and same as all the different permutations or combinations of letters in the 10 Maamorei, like he says in Tanya, that the Asara Maamorei, when you combine all the different ways the words can be put together, the tzirufim and the chilufim and tmuris and gematrius and so on. So everything in existence in some ways coming from these 22 letters. So he said, b'chol tzirufim protim, ad esis hamaymer b'chol Maamorei Bereishis, to the point of all the letters of the Maamorei, meaning all the statements made in all the story of creation. Shenikroim esis shenivru behen shemayim va'aretz b'chol tzva'am. They are called letters because God is actually uttering letters, words, that from them are created heaven and earth, b'chol tzva'am, and all their armies and all their celestial bodies and all their creations. So far we have machshava and now dibur. We'll soon get to Maisa. Let me stop here if anybody wants to ask anything. Okay. The Gam Hamerkova. So till now he was talking about physical creation. What about all the spiritual creations? So he says, also the Merkava, the chariot, the Malachim, the Yetzirah of Bria. Remember, we learned earlier there's Malachim, angels, connected to the Merkava, the chariot above. So you have the Malachim of Yetzirah and Bria, Hisrofim v'Chayis. They're called Srofim v'Chayis. Srofim are the angels usually of Bria, the fiery angels, Srofim. That's why they're called Srofim. You have Chayis, is usually the Chayis HaKodesh of Yetzirah. Shenivru b'tzirufi ha'esis dafke kiyadua. They too were created with tzirufi ha'esis, not just with thought. God expressed, called them by name. They were created with tzirufi ha'esis, as it's known. So that also is included in this structure, in this process of creation. Ad gam hisavus semeach v'chai lamata. I was going back to the point of the creation of semeach and chai, vegetation, the world of vegetation, and chai, of the animal kingdom, below. V'chol ha'kovez dal yisedus, and all the composites, and all the so-called mixtures of the ingredients of the four elements, and there are different combinations. Dal Yised is Gashmim, the Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Ofer, of fire, wind, or air, water, and earth. Nisava Yedei Tzirufi Eisis. All of them are created through the combination of letters. So letters becomes God's way of expressing himself. Think of them as channels of energy. I've given the example in the past, when you, let's say, take a projector, you project white light on a screen. So all you see is white light. It has no shape and form. You put letters on a film, then you'll see letters on the screen. Same thing with images. So letters serve as God's way of taking that seamless, or you could say shapeless, light, the white light, and turning it into specific details, because existence is defined by these details. So that's what the Oishis accomplish. Zuruf Oishis, Kamesha Kosav, like it says, Misha Omar, L'Shemen V'Yadlik. So we know the story. He says, the one that says that oil can burn, so too can vinegar burn. Why? Because it's God's words, it's his power. So the truth is his power, he can do whatever he wants. We learned this earlier, right? The Shemen V'Yadlik. That was when he spoke about, much earlier. Just want to see the connection. Where was it? Yeah. Page 367 in the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, he speaks about it. Just want to see how he said it there. There he was talking about the Nefesh Habamis is involved in understanding existence, but the Nefesh Halikis is involved in understanding the divine energy within existence. Yeah. Which is not just the object like oil. Yeah. So that fits very well here. Because when he's talking here, the Oishis, you're looking at the existence, but you're associating existence with the letters and words that God uttered to create that existence. Okay, so Misha Omar, the Shemen V'Yadlik, again, Omar, meaning God defined and said oil will have properties of fuel. Shezeo Mashnisava Teva Hashemen, that's the process that created the nature in oil. Lahadlik, to be flammable, to be able to ignite, to be able to burn, to illuminate, to be ignited. So the same one who said, Misha Omar to Shemen, Yemer b'tziruf kazeh l'chemetz v'yav. He could take this very energy that he's flowing to shemen, and that siruf, he can direct it towards vinegar, chemetz v'yav. We can't do that, obviously, because we're bound by the rules of nature, and shemen has the power to be fuel, and vinegar does not. But the Eibishter, remember, it's his koyach eliki. So even though he doesn't usually do this, that's a miracle, but he's capable of doing it. He's able to take the very letters. Like, you see this very, very often. I don't know if you're familiar with computer programming, but a programmer will have a problem. He'll look at the program language, and sometimes he'll realize that it could have been written a little differently and it would give the better results. So he'll do is he'll tamper with and tweak the language. He'll end up the same results, but he could end up creating something with the same language that's giving something else the power that when you, let's say, press this and this button, you can compensate for another button that may not be working. Just giving an example that once you're getting to the so-called the wiring of the letters that create, so Misha Yemer, the one who said the first, can also empower another entity with those the creative force to make it yadlik, to be able to be flammable. So I'm thinking the reason he brings that here, because we're going to learn, of course, that the Nefesh Habahamis begins by contemplating on existence. What is existence? The Nefesh Halikis will tell you, don't just look at the table, look at why God created the table. What are the words he used to create this table? What is his purpose? So the idea is that we are trying to understand the divine within it, and the Oisius help us. Machshava is removed. We don't know what God's thought. But his dibur allows us. The truth is, all of Torah is talking about. When you look in Torah, Torah tells us, and every object in existence, the Torah will tell us what is its purpose. So that's the level of Eisis Hadibur. B'kachu mamish, be'esis haruchnim, be'elam habriya. And this example that we've been talking about here, so is it exactly in the Eisis Ruchim, in the ethereal letters, in the world of Bria, shemachlif mitziruf litziruf, medin lechesed. So he's going back now, and when you go back to the engine room, you can actually, machlif, you can replace letters, tziruf litziruf, medin lechesed. So once din and chesed are established in lower worlds, that's what it is. But if you can go back to the engine room, so to speak, where the letters were first shaped and formed, that where the letters first were used to channel the energy, you have the ability to transfer from din to chesed, medin lechesed, kimachol v'gavriel, like the angels we talked about, Mechol and Gavriel, which is chesed and gvura, shenikroim sashel eish umayim. They're called the ministers of fire and water in the opposite order. Mechol is chesed, mayim, and Gavriel is eish. Shenikroim shel eish umayim lamata. They're the ministering angels of these two types of properties of fire and water below. So bottom line is, in the ishtalshus of creation, it begins in thought. From the thought in Bria, thought that turns into what letters? Those letters by the Creator can be replaced, can be transferred, can be, as I said, tweaked. And then it's going to take on shape as it comes down lower levels where it becomes defined shape, which he didn't get to yet, but we'll soon get to it. Remember, we're coming to understand three levels in creation, where we have the Bria, we have the word Yetzira, and the word Asiya. It compares to Machshava, Dibra, Maisa. Okay. Let me stop. Any questions?
Rabbi, where the potential for the workaround, if you will, like the Chesed and Gevurah, is that how we interact? Is that how free will gets activated in a sense?
I wouldn't bring free will into this picture.
Okay.
Free will bypasses everything in a certain way, and free will is more I would say this is more the dynamics of rewiring existence. It's like in 1960, there were a group of college students who came to see the Rebbe. And they asked him a lot of questions. One of the questions they asked him is, they say you can do miracles. Is it true? So the Rebbe said, I'm not responsible for what other people say about me, but let me define what a miracle is. He said a miracle means that you're able to go into the engine room and rewire the wires that define existence and nature a certain way. So in truth, it's not a miracle as in like some supernatural, magical act. It's someone that has the ability to go into that place. You know, it's like you suddenly see certain doctors, scientists. You know, some of us would call it magic. They do a little tinkering here and there, and they suddenly can do something. You say, how'd you do that? Because they know the human body well, or they knew the technology well, and they were, with some adjustments, they changed something that its effect was also changed. So then at the end of the Yechidus, at the end of the private audience, the Rebbe said to the students, he said, now, if you go away from this room tonight, and all of you will become better people and do an extra kind act and mitzvah, the Rebbe said, I will have performed a miracle. When he edited, the Rebbe changed it, we will have performed a miracle. He changed the I to we. So what's he saying? He's saying is that, yes, when we make choices, when we do certain things, our actions can rewire certain behavior and results. So I wouldn't use free will so much. Free will is a bigger topic, but I would use the ability to go into so-called the inner workings of something. I mean, if you wish, in therapy, a good therapist is doing that. They're trying to go back into your psyche and help you rewire certain neurons, so to speak. As they say, as the neurons are fired, that's how they get wired. So if you can somewhat think good, you know, you could actually generate better thoughts that will in turn generate better feelings and so on. So I would speak about it more in that context here.
Okay, thank you. I guess like neuro-linguistic programming or something like that, where you can sort of reprogram your thoughts, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now he says like this, for Omnom, Yesh Beis Madreges, however, there are two levels, Be'esis Halalu. These letters that we've been speaking about, most likely he means the letters of speech, but let's see where he goes with this. There are two levels. Echad, Mashegfar Nivdel Me'esis HaMachshava. Meaning, they've already gotten separate from the letters of thought. V'nikroim dibur sheshayich l'maisa, and that's called the dibur that relates to maisa. So after you've given a lot of thought to something, let's say, then you've given orders to your team. Here are my marching orders, in words. So the words now have left you, meaning you have now transferred over those words to others, and it's shaykh to maisa. So it's not dibur within yourself any longer. They are now going to implement in maisa what you just said. So he says, he calls that, it's kvar nivdol, v'nikra dibur sheshayach l'maisa. U'ka'oisius ha'dibur she mitzava lases. Like exactly what I just said. Like the words, letters of speech that you command someone to do. Kamoy v'yemer ihi oyer. She mitzava lases oyer. That God commanded there shall be light. V'oz esis alolu yetzin v'nivdalim lechutz. And when that happens, when Hashem said that, those letters go outside, so to speak, of the divine core, just like words, speech is outside of the thought. So they go to yetzin v'nivdalim lechutz liyes moker l'maisa b'peil mamash. To actually become a source, a divine source that doesn't remain within the core, but is now going to actually create light. Shezeu shenikra b'chinas asiyah she'achar hayitzira. This is the third level. This is called asiyah that comes after the yitzira, which relates to speech. Shebedibur. Shenikra asiyah shebedibur. That's called asiyah shebedibur because it's dibur as it's relating to an action. V'hu mashanasa dibur moker liyes yirida hagimel. So now it's going back to the three levels. So this is now how dibur has become a source of sustenance. A source to create the third descent. The first one was from thought to speech. The second is from the first was to thought. The second is to speech, and now speech to action. Yirida hagimel, like you said in the beginning of this discussion. I see it. Shubchinas asiyah mamish. This is the level of actually creating, not just speaking about it, not just saying Yehi Oyer, but the Yehi Oyer has now created light. This is the level that's called the power of the producer in the product. Mamish, literally. That there was actually said, Vayemer Elikim Yehi Oyer. That's level 2. God said that there be light. And then what does it say? Vayehi Oyer. And light was created. That's 3. Asiyah. The pearl mamish yotza lepeil lekoyach eliki shenimshach min adibur. So from the vayemer elikim, from dibur, has now extended from the dibur into maisa. Kamoi b'dvar Hashem shemayim nasu lepeil mamish. The word of God, heavens were nasu, were created, were made. Lepeil mamish in actuality. Kihu echad. No, Kihu omar vayihi, not echad, because he said vayihi oyer. Vayihi is more than vayomer. Hu tziva be'esis machshava shebedibur dvar melech shaltin shegezer mekayim. The next page, 379. These are the oisius that came from thought within the speech, where the king's words rule. Shegezer mekayim, he decrees and it's fulfilled into action. I just want to see maybe to how far to go here. The Nimtza.
This is all the first madrega of Oisius, like commanding versus actually it happening. Did I miss something, or did he do a base as well?
He didn't go to the base yet. I didn't see a base yet.
I didn't either. Okay.
I didn't see a base. So hopefully he'll get to the base. We'll have to figure it out. Okay. I just want to see if I go further here. Let me see. Okay. The nimtza b'chinas ha'maisa shenikra koyach ha'poel eliki b'asiyah mamish. So what do we derive from this? That the maisa, that's called the koyach ha'poel, the power of the producer in the product, the producer, the divine producer in asiyah mamish, because it became vayihi oyer. Ochuz v'kosher b'chitzenius hadibur, grasps and is bound to the outer dimension of dibur, because the outer dimension of dibur is what brought on this action. Shenikra asiyah shebedibur, oy dibur shebasiyah kanal. So it's called asiyah shebedibur, is when the asiyah that's still within the dibur as it's relating to the action. Oy dibur shebasiyah, how the words are relating to the action. Canal, the chitzenius hadibur, the yud maimoris, and the outer dimension of the 10 statements, ochuz v'kosher be'esis hamachshava. Okay, so chitzenius, 1 second, let me just see. Maisa holds on to the chitzenius hadibur. Chitzenius hadibur is holding on to thought, the letters of thought, okay, because that drives the dibur. Shenimshach be'esis hadibur Minahelam legili, from the concealed to the revealed. So he's also adding now also the flow. So it begins with thought. The outer dimension of thought manifests in speech. The outer dimension of speech manifests in Maisa. So it's either Dibur Sheba Maisa or Asiya Sheba Dibur. And here I will stop. Now comes another parenthesis. So did he say a second level in the process here without spelling it out? Or didn't he say, or he's going to say it later? I can't tell you. But let's see where it goes, and we'll see if there is another. It says two levels. I mean, it's Beis Madreg is Be'esis Allah, Masha. It could be Beis Madregis. He means the Esis Hadibur as it connects to Esis Machshava. Not sure. I don't want to speculate until we see how he finishes the subject matter. Okay. So bottom line is the Rebbe, Mittler Rebbe, has now laid out the process, how God chooses to explain to us his step-by-step way of creating, from thought to speech to action, and how that flows from one to the next. And obviously, we relate to the outer dimension most, but we can work our way all the way to Machshava. As I said, he explained earlier in Maamorei Be'echad, earlier in Ayin Beis, we talked mamish about that. I want to go back and see if there's any language there that's taken straight from here. That we'll see. So we'll stop here by the fourth line on page 379, before the parentheses. Any questions?
He references this level as either Asiya Sheba Dibur or Dibur Sheba Asiya, as if those are synonymous. And do you think that that's clear? Is he saying that, or that these may potentially be the two madregas? Because like it's
I just said you could, without finishing the whole subject, I could guess, speculate. I don't want to speculate. We'll see.
I see. Okay.
I don't know if it's the two madregas.
Uh-huh.
Or the next parenthesis is going to explain the two levels. I'm not sure. So I would wait and see how he reads and so on. I'm very patient. And we'll see. Either he spells it out or he doesn't spell it out, and then we'll figure it out.
Do you think he's okay? So I'm not. This
But
question.
Dibur Sheba Maisa and Maisa Sheba Dibur is not the same. Is not synonymous. Just for the record. Okay. Yeah. You want any questions?
Yeah, I had a question. So has the Mittler Rebbe at least hinted at the two levels? One being the utterance of the words is the process itself of creation, and then the actual substance of the words. So they're saying, and then there's
I don't know. You're going back
themselves.
again. You asked me to speculate whether he spelled out the two levels. He didn't.
No, but I thought he mentioned that there's the saying of it, the uttering of the words, which is starting the process of creation, and then there's the words themselves, which are the constitution of the creation, what's being made. No,
I understood the differences between Vayemer and Vayihi. That's speaking is speech. It's like the king ordering his people to build, then they build accordingly.
And one is becoming. Okay,
so there's thought, speech, and action. It's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Okay. Good. Are there any other questions? Okay, so we'll stop here. 379.